This revenge story contains intense acts of retribution that may be excessive and could be disturbing to some viewers.
The sterile glow of my monitor was my only company that night. "You are always working, Jack." Harper's voice echoed in my memory, a faint whisper against the hum of the server room. Each line of code was a cold comfort, a poor substitute for the warmth I used to feel in my own bed. Beside her, I was Jack, a master of logic and algorithms, but I hadn't anticipated the illogical crash of my own marriage. It began with whispers, "A new dress. Do you even notice me anymore?" she had asked, her eyes searching mine, and ended with the sickening realization that my wife was gone, and that I had let it happen. What kind of monster have I become to not see it sooner? And what kind of monster will I become to get her back? The harsh fluorescent lights of my Palo Alto office mocked my isolation, their cold glare reflecting the endless lines of code that had become a substitute for connection. They were precise, predictable, unlike the messy, unpredictable nature of my marriage, a system I had allowed to break down. "Another late one, huh?" my colleague Ben had said earlier, his voice laced with annoying sarcasm. "You ever go home, Jack?" I'd just shrugged, lost in my code. My reflection was a grim reminder: hollowed eyes, graying temples, and the faint scar above my right eyebrow. A childhood relic, now a mocking symbol of a life traded for calculation. From the outside, I was the Silicon Valley poster boy. Prestigious job, a perfect house I never saw, and a family that felt like strangers. Harper, her bright blue eyes my sun, now carried shadows behind her smile, a silent plea I was too absorbed to hear. "Mommy's sad," Emily had whispered during one of those rare moments I was actually home. "Why doesn't Daddy play with us?" Her words, innocent and cutting, echoed in my mind. Our daughter Emily still greeted me with enthusiasm. But those moments grew rare, choked by my workaholism. Each missed bedtime story was another cut, a reminder of what I was losing. The signs had been whispers, not screams. "Is this all we are, Jack?" Harper's voice, once warm, now held a strain, her sentences trailing off, as if acknowledging the futility of talking to me. Her eyes drifted away, seeking something or someone who could fill the void I had created. Subtle changes crept into our home: rearranged furniture, replaced decor, a new designer piece every week. "Just something to brighten up the place," she had said, her smile tight, a frantic attempt to fill an emotional vacuum with material beauty. The house was no longer a home, but a meticulously staged scene, and yet I remained oblivious. Our dinner table, once a space for connection, was now a battleground of silence. Emily's innocent chatter, a lonely bridge between us. Harper's eyes, when they met mine, held disappointment and a resigned sadness that I could no longer ignore. Move fast and break things, the Silicon Valley motto. But I never intended to apply it to my family. Yet here I was, watching my marriage crumble like faulty code, and incapable of implementing the necessary fixes. "Are you even listening, Jack?" she had asked once, her voice cracking with frustration. Brad Newman slipped in like poison, smooth, undetected, devastating. He commanded attention at a startup mixer. "Harper, isn't it? Love that dress," I remember him saying, his disarming smile hiding a calculated predator. His eyes lingered on Harper, assessing her vulnerabilities. I saw him approach, his movements purposeful, and Harper laughed, her eyes sparkling in a way I hadn't seen in years. That stung. A brief pang of jealousy I quickly dismissed. Another alarm I ignored. "Just someone from work," I had told myself as they laughed, their heads close together. The changes in Harper accelerated. Designer labels sprouted in her closet, her hair styled with meticulous detail, as if seeking someone's gaze, someone other than mine. She frequented startup events, places where Brad's charm held sway. The hushed phone calls, the screen angled away, each interaction a knife twisting in my stomach. "Just networking," she would say, her voice tight, and I would force myself to believe her. The excuses flowed as smoothly as my code: late-night meetings, networking events, women's entrepreneurship gatherings. My debugging instincts screamed corruption, but I hit ignore on the error messages, hoping it would resolve itself. Brad's presence became a haunting shadow, his name a recurring echo in her conversations. He was everywhere and nowhere, his influence changing Harper, her demeanor shifting, her absences growing. Her perfume changed, exotic and demanding attention. Her movements carried a new energy, and she started dressing like she was always ready for a photo op. "You look different," I had said once hesitantly, and she simply replied, "Maybe I am." She was changing, like a program being rewritten by someone else's hand, and I just watched, my code becoming my shield against the truth. I buried myself deeper, each commit another nail in our marriage's coffin. Yet I pushed changes, hoping the system would right itself. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was the one who had created the very vulnerability Brad was exploiting. Across the breakfast table, Harper's gaze was distant, like a connection timing out. Emily noticed, her questions about her busy mom growing harder to deflect. I was losing my wife to a man who could sell dreams, and I watched, helpless as my family's source code was rewritten, line by line. The night the sickening truth finally settled, I didn't go to work. I sat in the darkness of our living room, the patterns of the ceiling my only focus, a silent echo of my own shattered reality. It was then I called Frank Martinez. He came highly recommended from the shadows of the tech scene, a private investigator who could unearth digital secrets as easily as I could code a new app. His office was a server room masquerading as a detective agency, a place where I felt strangely at home amidst the blinking monitors and data streams. Frank's reports arrived like punches to the gut, each revelation more damning than the last. Brad wasn't just charming my wife. He was systematically draining her bank accounts, his manipulations of finely crafted malware. Harper's savings, gone. Her designer wardrobe, funded by credit cards I didn't know existed. Brad orchestrated every purchase, every decision, like a puppeteer controlling a delicate doll. A rage ignited within me, not just for myself, but for her vulnerability, and his cruelty. But the financial manipulation was merely the surface. As Frank dug deeper, a more sinister pattern emerged. A plot woven around a familiar name, Richard Armstrong, the silver-haired angel investor, a Silicon Valley legend known for his philanthropy and sharp investments, had been a constant presence at those charity galas. His steel blue eyes and distinguished demeanor, always surrounded by hopeful entrepreneurs, a symbol of wealth and power. And Brad was using Harper as his key to the kingdom. The chilling precision of Brad's long game was what truly made my hands tremble. He hadn't just stumbled upon Harper. He had orchestrated our chance meetings with Richard, carefully positioning her as the damsel in distress, trapped in a loveless marriage. My workaholism, my emotional distance, my dedication to code, all weaponized against me. They were talking points Brad coached her on, creating a false narrative of neglect to fuel Richard's sympathies. The sting of that realization, the knowledge that I was a pawn in his game, was almost unbearable. The surveillance photos Frank provided showed the disturbing truth. Harper and Richard, heads bent close in conversation, while Brad loomed in the background, a shadowy puppet master. Each photo was time-stamped, a precise record of Brad's calculated manipulations. Harper was being used, her vulnerabilities exploited, her emotions twisted into a weapon to target Richard's wealth. This wasn't just about my marriage. It was a calculated act of theft. Frank's investigation revealed the disturbing depth of Brad's game. He had coached Harper, manipulating everything, from her body language to her conversation topics, turning her into the perfect lure for Richard's attention. She had become his unwitting tool, a social API designed to breach the defenses of a wealthy investor. Brad had studied Richard, his past relationships, his preferences, with the precision of a hacker mapping system weaknesses. My wife had become the honeypot in his elaborate trap. The recorded conversations between Brad and Harper, acquired by Frank, exposed the predator beneath the charm. Brad's voice, once smooth and persuasive, was now manipulative and cold, revealing his calculating intent. He would alternate between praise and subtle threats, keeping her emotionally dependent while subtly pushing her toward Richard. "You are perfect for this, Harper," Brad's voice dripped through my headphones. "Richard needs someone like you, sophisticated, beautiful, understanding. Just imagine the life you could have, away from your tech-obsessed husband, who probably doesn't even notice when you are gone." The words, meant to seduce, were to me a blade twisting inside the wound. Hearing Harper's voice, once so strong and confident, now laced with uncertainty and desperation, was another blow. Brad had identified her vulnerabilities, her loneliness, her unfulfilled dreams, her craving for validation, and had exploited them with surgical precision. He had created a dependency, making her believe that he was her only path to happiness. He was stealing her, bit by bit, and I had done nothing to stop it. The final piece of Frank's investigation revealed Brad's ultimate goal: Richard's substantial investment in a new venture. Millions in funding that would give Brad control over a significant portion of Richard's portfolio. Harper was merely a means to an end, a social tool Brad was using to access Richard's resources. It was all a game, a cruel, manipulative game with real-life consequences. Richard, it turned out, wasn't just another wealthy, clueless investor. Frank's background check revealed a man who had been burned before by similar schemes, his wealth a magnet for gold diggers and con artists. His ice-blue gaze, once dismissed as arrogance, now felt like the shield of a man who had seen the worst of human nature. Brad's elaborate plot, using Harper as an unwitting accomplice, had come dangerously close to succeeding. The weight of the revelation sat heavily on my chest, threatening to crash my entire system. My wife, a victim of my own neglect, was entangled in a web of deception that threatened to destroy both her and my life. Our marriage, like corrupted code, seemed beyond repair, and I had no idea how to salvage what remained. It was at that point, staring into the digital abyss, I realized that I had to take control. I owed it to myself and to Emily to do something. The decision to approach Richard was a gamble, a high-stakes operation with no guarantee of success, a move that felt like executing a critical command with a corrupted system. I found him in his private office suite in Menlo Park, where the floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the tech empire he'd helped build, a city of glass and steel that felt both magnificent and terrifying. He sat behind a desk the size of a conference table, a mahogany behemoth that seemed to dwarf even him, his silver-gray hair catching the soft afternoon light, those piercing blue eyes scrutinizing me with an intensity that felt like a diagnostic scan. I felt like a bug under a microscope, laid bare and vulnerable. I laid out the evidence with methodical precision, each piece carefully placed like a card in a high-stakes poker game. Frank's reports, the surveillance photos, the recorded conversations, a meticulously constructed narrative of betrayal, each detail a nail hammered into Brad's coffin. I watched Richard's face as he absorbed the information, his expression hardening with each new revelation, the lines around his eyes deepening, not with anger, but with the grim recognition of a seasoned soldier who had seen the horrors of battle before. There was a chilling calm about him, an air of controlled fury that sent a shiver down my spine. "They think they're so clever," Richard finally spoke, his voice low and dangerous, carrying the weight of countless past betrayals. "These young predators, with their practiced smiles, they see our wealth as a resource to be harvested, a weakness to be exploited." He picked up the photo of Brad and Harper at the charity gala, his manicured fingers tracing the edge with a deliberate, almost predatory precision. It was like he was studying his prey, mapping his weaknesses. What followed was a masterclass in calculated strategy. Richard's mind worked with the efficiency of a supercomputer, processing multiple scenarios simultaneously, calculating probabilities, formulating contingencies, and creating backup plans for backup plans. We met in secure locations, often late at night in his private office or aboard his yacht in the San Francisco Bay, where the rhythmic rocking of the waves provided a cover for our conspiratorial discussions. The very air around us seemed to crackle with tension, with a shared desire for retribution. Our plan was simple, yet intricate. Richard would play the role of the besotted investor, captivated by Harper's vulnerability, while appearing oblivious to Brad's manipulations, a performance of the highest caliber. He would propose a destination wedding aboard a luxury cruise ship, a floating palace in the Caribbean where we could execute our revenge far from the constraints of the law and the prying eyes of the world. It was an act of cold calculation, a carefully orchestrated trap designed to ensnare Brad in his own web. The logistics were planned with meticulous care, every detail accounted for. Richard's security team, a group of former military operatives who transitioned into private sector work, would pose as crew members, their movements fluid and silent, their presence a constant, unseen threat. Frank's technical expertise would ensure that security cameras experienced convenient malfunctions at critical moments, creating blind spots in the vessel's surveillance system. Even the ship's manifest was carefully curated to minimize any potential witnesses, ensuring that our operation would go unseen. I felt like a part of a carefully calibrated machine, each of us playing a precise role in an elaborate act of retribution. The weeks leading up to the cruise felt like a long, tense deployment, each day bringing us closer to the final execution. I watched from a distance as Richard played his part flawlessly, his interactions with Harper and Brad carefully calibrated to maintain their false sense of security, a masterpiece of manipulation. His expensive watches and tailored suits were props, his lavish gifts and romantic gestures a charade, designed to lull them into a false sense of security. I felt a growing sense of unease, an uncomfortable mixture of excitement and dread, like a programmer debugging critical code under immense pressure. The cruise ship, a floating behemoth of steel and luxury, became our execution environment, a stage set for our dark drama. I observed from the shadows as Harper walked the deck in designer resort wear, her blonde hair catching the Caribbean sunlight, her movements betraying a vulnerability that Brad had skillfully exploited. There were moments when glimpses of the woman I had loved broke through her constructed facade, a genuine laugh, a flicker of uncertainty in those blue eyes, a haunting reminder of who she once was. But then Brad would appear, his hand possessively at her waist, and the mask would snap back into place, like a character on stage stepping back into their role. I found myself battling a mix of rage and despair, a battle I knew I couldn't afford to lose. Richard chose his moment with the precision of a surgeon wielding a scalpel. During the lavish reception, he delivered a toast to their future together, his voice dripping with an irony that only he and I could appreciate. the act of performance perfected to a deadly art. The champagne flowed freely, each glass laced with a fast-acting sedative that would render them unconscious, a silent and invisible weapon. The plan was designed to be efficient, swift, and brutal, a surgical strike executed with cold precision. I watched from my hidden vantage point as the drugs took effect, their insidious influence creeping into their systems, like a computer virus infecting vulnerable software. Harper's movements became increasingly unsteady, her designer dress a cumbersome burden, her smile faltering and forced. Brad's smooth confidence began to crack, his calculated charm dissolving into confusion. The mask he had worn so effortlessly now sliding off his face, revealing the predator underneath. Richard's security team moved with military efficiency, each member a silent instrument in our plan, intercepting them before they could cause a scene and extracting them from the reception under the guise of excessive celebration, their presence like shadows in the night. The precision of it all was terrifying, a carefully choreographed dance of vengeance. The lifeboat, waiting like a tomb, had been modified according to Frank's exact specifications. A death trap disguised as an escape. A precisely drilled hole, small enough to be overlooked, but large enough to ensure the boat's inevitable demise, would seal their fate in the unforgiving waters of the Caribbean. The sharks, known to patrol these waters, were our natural allies, our silent executioners. Richard's men lowered the boat with mechanical precision. The whirring of the davits, a chilling soundtrack to our revenge, an ominous lullaby to their demise. Cutting the lifeboat's tether felt like crossing a point of no return, a final and irreversible act that sealed their fate. The small craft bobbed in the ship's wake, growing smaller against the vast, inky expanse of the ocean, disappearing into the blackness like a memory fading into the night. The moon cast a silver path on the water, a silent spotlight on our act of retribution, a haunting reminder of what we had done. I thought I saw Harper stir for a brief second, a flicker of movement that could have been the play of shadows, the last gasp of a dying light, and a pang of guilt pierced my heart. Richard joined me at the railing, his presence solid and reassuring, a silent understanding passing between us. "It's done," he said simply, his voice carrying neither triumph nor remorse, as cold and unforgiving as the steel hull of the ship beneath our feet. The waves lapped against the ship, washing away any trace of our actions, the sound a chilling reminder of the ocean's unforgiving nature. In that moment, we were just two men, bound together by a shared darkness, by the weight of our actions, staring into a vast and unforgiving horizon. The taste of victory was bitter, the silence deafening. As the ship continued its journey through the night, I was caught in a maelstrom of emotions, a chaotic storm that raged within me. Satisfaction clashed with guilt, justice warred with revenge, and the stark reality of our actions began to sink in. We had executed our plan with impeccable precision. But as I stared into the darkness where the lifeboat had disappeared, I couldn't help but wonder about the cost of our perfect crime, and whether any form of revenge could ever truly mend the gaping wounds in our hearts, or if it would simply create more scars, leaving us forever marked by the darkness we had embraced. And I felt a growing fear that what we had done had changed us irrevocably, that we were not the men we once were, but something darker, something broken and irreparable. Returning to our Palo Alto home felt like entering a tomb, a mausoleum built of expensive materials and empty promises. Every piece of furniture, every designer item that Harper had carefully chosen, now mocked me, silent witnesses to the void that consumed our life, their presence a constant, painful reminder of what we had lost. The morning light that streamed through her carefully selected curtains cast long accusatory shadows across the walls, each space echoing with a deafening silence that seemed to press down on me with unbearable weight. The air felt heavy with her absence, her ghost haunting every corner of the house. Emily's questions were relentless, each one a painful twist of the knife in my heart. When is Mommy coming back? Her innocent eyes, a mirror image of Harper's, searched mine for answers I couldn't provide, her gaze a relentless reminder of my failures. The freckles scattered across her nose seemed to darken as she frowned, struggling to make sense of a world that had suddenly become unpredictable and terrifying. Her small face etched with a sadness that was beyond her years. Her pain was a constant reminder of the destruction I had caused. I had meticulously prepared a cover story, crafting a narrative to protect myself, like creating a script to navigate a new software system. The missing persons report I'd filed days before the cruise provided the foundation for our carefully constructed lie. The police interviews, the search efforts, the media coverage, all precisely calibrated subroutines in our elaborate revenge program, each detail intended to deflect suspicion and maintain our facade. But no amount of preparation, no amount of logic or planning could shield me from the raw, unadulterated anguish in my daughter's voice, the pain of her grief a constant, piercing reminder of my actions. "You sent Mommy away." The accusation came during breakfast one morning, delivered with the force of a physical blow. Emily's small hands were balled into fists, her pigtails trembling with the force of her emotions, her face contorted in a mask of grief and anger. Her cereal sat untouched in the bowl, the milk growing warm, mirroring the tears that welled up in her eyes, each one a drop of acid on my soul. "I want her back. Bring her back." Her words, a desperate plea from a broken heart, hit me like a denial of service attack, overwhelming my emotional defenses and leaving me exposed and vulnerable, crashing through the meticulously constructed walls I had built around myself. Guilt, a corrosive acid, ate at me from the inside out, an unrelenting torment that seemed to consume me. Sleepless nights stretched into endless days, each hour a grim reminder of the choices I had made. My clothes hung loosely on my frame, a testament to my lost appetite, and a constant ache in my gut became a familiar companion, a physical manifestation of my inner turmoil. I threw myself into parenting, desperately trying to compensate for my past failures. But Emily's grief proved resistant to my efforts, a wound that no amount of care could heal. I was a failure, both as a husband and a father, haunted by the ghosts of my past choices. Her teacher called, her voice laced with concern, to share the devastating news that Emily had become withdrawn in class, her bright spirit extinguished, her participation dropping like a failed application crashing under pressure. My daughter, once so vibrant and engaged, had become quiet and isolated, her face etched with a constant sadness, her light dimming with each passing day. She had taken to drawing pictures, endless variations of three figures. A tall man, a woman with yellow hair, and a small girl standing between them, each drawing a silent indictment of my actions, a haunting reminder of the family I had destroyed with my own hands. The visual representation of my failures, a constant reminder of the price of my revenge. Richard maintained our facade with unwavering precision, playing the grieving, almost bridegroom with an Oscar-worthy performance. His public displays of grief and his generous rewards for information helped deflect any suspicion, maintaining the carefully constructed narrative we had built to protect ourselves. But in those private moments, when we met to ensure our stories aligned, I caught glimpses of the demons that haunted him, a reflection of the darkness that had taken root in my own soul. The weight of past betrayals and the lingering question of our morality. He was just as lost as I was. The silence in our home had become a tangible presence, pressing in on me like a physical weight, filling the spaces once occupied by Harper's laughter, the soft click of her heels on the hardwood floor, her warmth now replaced with a cold and empty void. Emily's room remained a time capsule of happier days, filled with photos of her mother, her smile frozen in moments we could never reclaim. Each night, I'd find Emily clutching her mother's old sweater, breathing in the faint, lingering scent of Harper's perfume as she slept, trying desperately to hold on to a memory that was slowly fading. Her efforts, a heartbreaking reminder of our loss. The victory I had imagined achieving had dissolved like sea spray on the Caribbean wind, leaving behind nothing but emptiness and despair. Instead, I was faced with the stark and unavoidable reality that revenge, like a poorly optimized algorithm, had consumed all our resources, producing nothing but devastation and destruction. I had eliminated the source of my pain, but in doing so, I had irrevocably damaged the most precious part of my life, my daughter's happiness and her trust, and the very fabric of my own being. The cost had been far higher than I could have ever imagined. In my darkest moments, which seemed to stretch endlessly into the night, when the house felt most empty and the silence most deafening, I would replay the events in my mind, like a debugging session gone horribly wrong. Had there been another way? Could I have patched the vulnerabilities in my marriage before Brad exploited them, before it was too late? The questions looped endlessly, finding no resolution, a constant gnawing recursion eating away at my conscience, trapping me in a cycle of guilt and regret. Emily's words, "You sent Mommy away," had become my personal null-pointer exception, a fatal error in the core code of my existence that I could neither catch nor resolve. I had executed my revenge with flawless precision, with the skill of a master coder, but the cost of running that program had been far higher than I had ever calculated. The bugs I had attempted to eliminate had multiplied, manifesting in my daughter's tear-filled eyes, in my own sleepless nights, and in the gnawing void that now filled my life, proving that sometimes the most elegant solutions can still produce the most devastating outcomes, leaving behind a legacy of pain and regret. And the chilling reality was that I was the architect of that devastation, the coder of my own destruction.